BulkLoads Podcast, your number one resource for everything bulk freight trucking.
Alright, that's the concept,
Hey guys, welcome to the BulkLoads Podcast. Today I have Fred Padilla in here with me.
Howdy, Tyler.
Jared is actually out. He's taking care of some business in another state, so he was out this week. So we get the honor of doing this intro outro here for him, which is great because we get to bring on Fred. Fred has been a long time veteran here at BulkLoads. We call him one of the OGs because he was actually working in Jared's basement whenever he started this. Fred's been a part of this for a long time. He actually moved over to our insurance arm not too long ago. So he's been over there writing some insurance. Fred, do you want to kind of talk about kind of starting here at BulkLoads? Just give a brief walkthrough of just your experience here.
Yeah. As far as that goes, I started out of Jared's basement. It was just Jared and I working out of the basement. We did that for... it felt like forever, but it was a pretty short-lived experience. And we were able to get our first office space a few years ago. Even then, there was still only a couple of employees coming in and out of the office. Tyler, I know you were one of those employees that stuck around, which is good to see you here still. As far as that goes, we have been moving at a very quick rate. I mean, things blew up, and now we've got this beautiful office space that Jared has provided for us. Yeah.
And Fred, you've been over at the insurance side. You've been writing a lot of accounts, dealing with a lot of clients on that end, which is why we wanted to bring you on today, because we're actually bringing on Jared and Larry are bringing on Drew Easton with AmWins on today. Drew has been on the podcast before. I think it was last February. He was on here talking about some different insurance stuff. But Fred, you deal with Drew and AmWins quite a bit. Can you kind of what really does AmWins do? Correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it is, you guys kind of submit different policies to them, and then they submit it to the underwriter, or they're actually underwriting as well.
Sure. So AmWins, in a way, both of the things you said are right. AmWins is a wholesale market. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll send a submission over to AmWins, and when we send it to AmWins, then that wholesale retailer will send it out to multiple markets. It's unique what Drew does, though, because Drew heads up their fraud and pollution program, their environmental program. So with that being said, Drew is very specific to the market that he works with. And Drew actually has all of the authority to bind accounts and all that. That's nice. Why it's really nice working with Drew. He has that extensive knowledge on that end of things.
Yeah, I know Drew's been, he's been in the industry for 30 years now. So the dude's just a wealth of knowledge. Today, he's going to line out a lot of stuff. He's going to talk more on the environmental and pollution coverages, but he's also going to dive into what we call a TRS designation and why if you're not working with an insurance agent that has one of those designations, you need to switch, or you need to look for somebody who is. And Fred, you have your TRS designation. Can you kind of explain what that is?
Yes, sir. So the TRS stands for Transportation Risk Specialist. That being said, we went through, it was long days.
Hours and hours of training.
Yes, lots of training. But honestly, I think I learned more throughout doing this TRS classes than I did throughout college. I mean, it was just a wealth of knowledge, and then actually being able to apply this into the instances that we work with every single day. So these guys with their hopper bottoms and tankers and all these different divisions that we're insuring, they break it down in this class or in this course, and they explain where, the broad and pollution endorsements come in at. And that's where anytime I've ever had a question about it, I call Drew. He picks up the phone immediately and he says, "What's up? Let's get this figured out." And he's always real quick about actually breaking things down with me. So it's nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we'll kind of leave it at that. Before we jump into the episode, we're actually going to do a truck feature. One of our BulkLoads member, David Bitts, Joe is going to throw that picture up on the screen. We want to highlight him this week. I think we actually did him on social media as well. So if you go to our Facebook page, you'll see that truck picture, or you can see it on the podcast here. He's out of Pennsylvania, MDB Hauling LLC. I just showed you the picture, Fred. He's got a slick setup. He's got that like old school classic look. It is a slick rig.
It is a really nice rig. Honestly, if I could insure a truck like that, I'd be happy.
Well, we may hit up David after this. So
I might.
All right. Well, without further ado, here is Drew Easton with AmWins.
Hey guys, Larry here with the BulkLoads Podcast. Got Jared with me.
Howdy.
Got Drew Easton here with me, special guest today, all the way from Indianapolis. So today we're bringing you guys an episode going to be centered around insurance. We got a lot of new stuff in the works and a lot of good stuff for 2024. So we wanted to bring Drew on today. Drew, I'm going to let you explain what you do and who you are. We've had you on the podcast before. For the listeners that haven't heard that podcast, just kind of give us a wide scope of who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me apologize. I've got a face for radio, so this probably doesn't translate too well. But I am an underwriter by trade. I've been in the underwriting business for about 30 years, and we are actually a program administrator. So we have extended authority. It's proprietary authority that we have for a program that has a specific appetite that includes a lot of the risks that BulkLoads writes. So we're happy to be a part of this. We are actually the underwriter. We're the facilitator. We're the pricer. We're all things in between as it relates to the placement of that insurance.
Sure. So for our listeners that don't quite understand the relationship, here's a quick breakdown. You know, you guys deal with us at BulkLoads Insurance. We are the retail agent. We actually are not the underwriters. We have contracts with underwriters. Drew administers a program that we use that's really dedicated for anything that has to do with grain and feed, and also fertilizer and hazmat products. Any of the tanker guys out there listening, this product fits specifically into you. Talk a little bit about what makes the program unique compared to other insurance placements.
Sure. Well, the program has a legacy of being a hazmat program where we're writing placarded loads and what have you. But over the years, we've been able to expand that to complementary exposures, environmental risks. And what we're really driven by is that pollution component to those loads being hauled. Really doesn't matter what that commodity is. If it ends up in the wrong place, you may have a pollution of that. And so we pride ourselves on recognizing what those exposures are and trying to provide that coverage that will square out and cover those holes or those gaps, or even just the generic exposures that risk has. As you mentioned, as a program administrator, think of us really as the extended underwriting arm of a carrier. That's really who we are, the outsourced underwriting. And what we bring is a very unique niche. We're deep and narrow that we write environmental business. That is it. We're not dealing with your for-hire, over-the-road, coast-to-coast stuff. While we do dabble in that, and what I mean by that is we'll write a risk that may have a little bit of that exposure, but really what gets us excited are the risks that haul that bulk commodity, that haul that hazardous commodity, that again, if released, requires that cleanup, that environmental exposure piece.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you clarifying that. One of the main questions that we get all the time is, is my load hazardous, or why do I need the pollution liability endorsement? We see that. We love putting it and endorsing it onto the policy. It's added protection. Can you talk a little bit about what that extra protection on the pollution endorsement does to the policy?
Certainly. Well, a couple of things here. When people think of hazmat or they think of environmental, they immediately look at placards, right? Does this risk have placards? Does it have the little diamond on the side, the scary red writing, whatever the case may be? Well, that doesn't necessarily dictate that it's an environmental exposure. You're talking about recognizing what that commodity is for first responders to recognize what's in there and respond to that release correctly. Is it foam? Is it water? Whatever the case may be. But there are other aspects of the motor carrier operations that create huge exposures for environmental. Specifically bulk loads, that could be a biohazard. And if that's released in the wrong spot, unfortunately, the motor carrier doesn't get to dictate the response. That's going to come from law enforcement or the first responders. And what you may have is thinking you have an innocuous release that now is going to cost dollars to clean up. So that's a big deal. But break it down very basically. If you've got a motor carrier that has the MCS 90 applied, so they're hauling non-exempt commodities, they're crossing state lines, some of those other provisions. If they have an MCS 90, they have a pollution exposure built into that coverage form. People think of the MCS 90 as a document that's going to afford pollution coverage. It's going to respond for you. They're kind of right. It will respond, but there's an indemnification clause built into that MCS 90 form that says, guess what? If me as the insurance company have to respond to clean up this event, but you don't have pollution coverage, I've got the ability to go back at the motor carrier and secure those monies, be indemnified for those monies I spent out. So really, I look at it a couple different ways. Look at the commodity and recognize in any way can that be interpreted as an environmental load, and if it's released as a required cleanup. And then part two, does my policy have an MCS 90? And if it does, I've got to think long and hard if I'm going to ignore that pollution exposure.
So making it really simple for our listeners, if you're hauling grain and feed, do they need the pollution liability endorsement?
Conservative underwriter than I am, absolutely. I don't think there's any question you need that. Again, if that product is dropped in the wrong spot, you're not going to be the ones dictating the cleanup. Now, I can see the other side of it. You drop that in a parking lot. It's not hard to come out with a couple scoop shovels and load the darn thing back up. But can you guarantee that that's where that loss occurs? I can't.
That's good. Switching gears here a little bit, you do a lot of work with the MCIEF. Kind of talk about that a little bit and explain that to our audience and what that's doing in the trucking insurance world.
Maybe put a little history on this. As an old school underwriter, I've been doing this for 30 years. When I first got started, immediately I was thrown into courses. I was thrown into classwork, and those were provided by my employer at the time. We actually had a school. I would go and attend classes and learn the nuances of insurance, coverage, the risk transfer process, all of those other fun things that we took for granted back then. Flash forward to today, there aren't many insurance companies that provide that level of education.
Sure.
There aren't many retail agents that can afford to offer that kind of education either, because it's a significant expense to have the kind of talent that can provide that level of education. So going back several years ago, a gentleman by the name of Tommy Rook, the godfather of truck insurance, also the son of a trucker, a great guy who said, you know what, we've got an opportunity here to help educate insurance agents about truck insurance. And oh, by the way, maybe we can educate some truckers about insurance agents too. So him and a couple of his good close friends created the MCIEF, the Motor Carrier Insurance Education Foundation, and it has exploded into the premier provider of truck insurance education. I'm a proud member of the board, and I'm also a participating speaker as well at a number of events. And I can't say enough about the quality of the education they provide. The talent that they have come in that speaks about insurance and the risk transfer process it's second to none. The events they have, it is the who's who of truck insurance. And by who's who, I'm talking motor carriers are there, insurance agents are there, carriers are there, program administrators, wholesale insurers, you name it. Anybody who is remotely involved in truck insurance attends these events. They don't want to be left out. But the key process to that is this is an educational foundation. So they're providing that education, and the end goal is to earn a designation. The TRS, the Transportation Risk Specialist. And in my opinion, humble or not humble, I don't know that I would feel comfortable recommending anybody do business with a retailer for truck insurance that doesn't have that TRS designation. That is critical because not only do they speak your language on the truck side, more importantly, they speak the language of insurance.
Sure.
And they're going to help guide you when we talk about the MCS 90, we talk about the CA 9948 pollution endorsement. They're going to be able to guide that individual risk to recognize what those exposures are and then best address those.
Sure. So that TRS designation is important.
It's key. And I'm telling you, when I get submissions that come in from a number of our partners, I see that on the email. And I can tell you there's a different quality between somebody who sends it in that's got the TRS designation behind their name and somebody who doesn't.
Do you see a lot of submissions that come in from agents that don't specialize in trucking?
Pardon me. We do. However, those don't tend to be really big partners for us because we're such a niche operation. But we do have occasional submissions that come in from perhaps a larger shop where this actual producer doesn't necessarily have the technical knowledge on the transportation side. Our preference is to get that back through somebody else on the agency side that has that skill set so that we're not teaching a new language.
Sure.
It's not an automatic no, but I can tell you it starts to sound like a no pretty quick if they don't have that TRS designation or they're not a transportation specialist.
That's good. I want to kind of segue here a little bit into a market update, kind of what's going on in truck insurance. We hear all the time, hey, my insurance renewal is going up. What's going on? I got non-renewed. My rates are high. Can you kind of give us a little insight into what's currently happening, the current environment, and what insured should be expecting at renewal?
Sure. I think first and foremost, we have to talk about what insurance is. It's the many paying for the losses of a few. We're trying to grab this big pile of money so that when losses occur, we're able to funnel those dollars back out to those folks that have the losses. Let's be clear. If we're getting a big pile of money from really bad risks, we better make sure that pile of money is huge because they're going to have significant losses. But the one thing I think a lot of folks forget about, specifically as motor carriers, they think that they're going to be able to dictate what their price is based on their loss experience. They can't dictate it, but they can impact it. So the way I like to look at it is you've got all risks are on a spectrum. So you've got really good risks and really bad risks of this size and this operation. Those risks that perform well are going to pay less than those folks that don't. So that's the correction that happens. But let's be honest, in the economy we're in right now, there's nothing that's getting cheaper to buy. Everything's going up. And a couple things that were hidden over the last handful of months that people didn't recognize is that the value of equipment was going up. So guess what? Their insurance rates are going to go up, right? They're going to pay a greater dollar amount, even though it may be the same rate. The risk that they were insuring was more expensive to insure. Also, when you had losses, you had a vehicle that was down, there was downtime. You have more expensive repair rates. You have mechanics who are charging more. It was difficult with supply chain. It still kind of is to get certain parts. So there was a further delay. And oh, by the way, when you got those parts, they were more expensive. So there was a compounding on all of this. So the one thing we have to recognize is that for as long as I can see, rates are going to continue to go up. I think the better question is, what can I as a motor carrier do to mitigate that expense? And focus on being safe, focus on reducing frequency, hiring and retaining quality drivers, educating, developing my drivers, holding them accountable. All those other things are your controllables, and allow your retail agent with that TRS designation and your conciliator, your underwriter, work through the problems of the math and make sure they get you that best premium for the exposures presented.
You had mentioned earlier that you would always recommend dash cams. Talk about, from an underwriter perspective, when you see an opportunity that comes in to quote it, whether they have dash cams versus an opportunity that doesn't, and what's your mindset going into that?
Well, let's break it down. First and foremost, I just flew in from Indianapolis, and I guarantee you I was on dozens of video cameras on the way in, right? So the argument that I have always heard about privacy just doesn't exist, right? I also use the analogy when I hear some truckers, and I'm on Road Dog Radio with some frequency, when I'm on there and a trucker will call in and say, this is my place of business, I don't want a camera on me. I appreciate that. My office is a glass cube. That's my place of business. I don't have any privacy there. And this individual has responsibility for an 80,000 pound sledgehammer. I think it's appropriate for them to be viewed to some extent. Now, that's the inward facing cameras. What we're talking about really are the dash cams that are outward facing. My issue is if you're not using those, you're putting yourself in a very bad spot. We on the insurance side simply want to know the facts. It's that basic. And those cameras, the video footage can exonerate drivers. And we've seen that with great regularity. In fact, go Google some things on YouTube. You'll find that out there. But number two, on the flip side of that, if we've got a motor carrier who was at fault in that loss, it allows us to mitigate that expense by trying to resolve that claim, settle it as quickly as possible without incurring a great amount of expense. And, let's be clear, when we involve attorneys, things get expensive very quickly. So when we can recognize and memorialize those facts, it allows us to recognize the settlement opportunity or the deniability of that claim. And in certain jurisdictions going forward, you're going to find that they will allow that video evidence to allow for summary disposition, basically throwing out that claim that was presented against you, that lawsuit, if the video evidence is clear and concise to prove that you were not at fault for that loss. So you're no longer having that interpreted by a jury.
Sure.
It's a little bit of a different play. So it's critical for those folks who are trying to avoid it. I would encourage you to embrace it. And I can tell you that from an insurance perspective, that question is becoming more and more frequent, and those risks that do embrace the technology, including ELD and all the other stuff that's out there, those are the folks that are going to be on that spectrum towards the lower end of price.
Sure. Yeah, that's really good. Another topic that we want to cover here real quick, because there's a lot of media attention around it in the trucking space currently, is predatory towing and what's going on with that. Can you touch on that just briefly on predatory towing? Can you also touch on what your program does for towing as far as limits?
There are a couple things that can put a motor carrier out of business. One is cargo coverage or inadequate cargo coverage, because we know that's a third-party coverage. They're going to pay their shipper, their vendor, their consignee. The other one is towing, because there are situations where not only will the towing charge be significant, but they also may hold the cargo hostage, basically, until you pay that bill. Some states have what's called a replevin action, where they will allow you to post a bond, the insurance carrier basically to post a bond until they negotiate that, the actual amount, so they'll release the load. But a lot of states don't honor that. So now you're stuck as the motor carrier with your insurance carrier trying to figure out how the heck you can get this property released. And oh, by the way, you're going to be incurring expenses because you're going to charge you storing, right? All these things can factor into that. And recognizing that we live in a just-in-time world at JIT, any delay in getting that shipment to the endpoint is critical in the motor carrier's relationship with that shipper, that consignee. It's tremendous. So back to the comment, though, we have seen this for decades, and some states are worse than others, Texas, where they will see exorbitant rates for these tows, or they'll show unnecessary equipment was used at the scene to allegedly write the units or whatever the case may be. So it's critical, back to the cameras or what have you, it's critical to document those scenes when they occur, because often, and I'm an old claims guy from back in the day as well, we would get a bill for 20 or 30 people that were out at a load, and they were going to say they were going to unload and reload a trailer or what have you. And we had photographic evidence of these guys just sitting around. They weren't even really working. So we were able to take some of that expense away. But the unfortunate part is it's real, it's out there. You don't get a choice in many cases, because they're going to dispatch some other tow facility. You don't get to choose who that's going to be, because law enforcement wants to clear the scene, right? They want to get this road back open again. So you are very much in a bad spot when that loss occurs. Now, we in the industry are trying to make a concerted effort to improve this. There's a lot that's going on right now. It's catching the attention of a lot of people. ATRI, that's ATRI, they do a lot for the transportation business. They look at all kinds of things, bottlenecks, nuclear verdicts, etc. This is on their agenda item right now. And if they either just came out with a report or it's coming out, I haven't seen it yet, about predatory towing. So I'm interested to see what their findings are. And perhaps they may identify some of these proverbial hellholes that we talk about that will help educate some of the motor carriers to recognize what their lanes of travel may be.
Hey guys, I want to take just a quick pause to show you these books. If you hadn't seen already, I started 5 years ago creating a collection of children's book called Semi-Sam. When my boys were little, we could not find any books on trucking, so we went ahead and started our own. These make great books to teach kids not just about trucking, but about the value of agriculture and a lot of what our clients do. So check out Semi-Sam. You can find them on Amazon. Just search Semi-Sam, or contact us here at BulkLoads, and we'll be happy to get them in your hands. They make great Christmas gifts, great birthday gifts. If you have a niece, nephew, child that loves books, this is a great one to get to them. Again, Semi-Sam, check it out. There's 3 out on Amazon right now. Thank you. God bless.
Can you talk about the second half of that question about how your program responds to the towing, and maybe contrast that with another insurance carrier, or what the standard is in the industry?
I don't really want to compare ourselves to other people, but how about if I say this? Towing is extremely important. And what we recognize within our program is we will provide reasonable and customary tow. Now, that leaves a little bit open for discussion, but that allows folks to have a better understanding of what that expense is going to be versus a small limit like $2,000 or $5,000. Let's be clear. If you get a predatory towing bill, or even just a normal towing bill, it's probably going to be well north of $5,000. So when you see these limits out there that are rather small, even $10,000, that can easily be absorbed by these towing companies and the storage that's associated with that. So we recognize that We're also very good on the claim side with the carrier. So we try to get things moved quickly. And because of that, we provide that reasonable and customary coverage that it's not defined as a small number. It's going to be what's reasonable for that area and what's customary for the expense associated with that tow.
So insured has a $20,000 tow bill, and you review it, and it's like, that's reasonable for this geographic area. That makes sense. It's getting paid.
Correct. Right. There's not a limit associated with that. It's reasonable and customary. Now, if this accident occurred in Joplin, Missouri, and they decided to tow it out to Los Angeles, California, I don't think that's reasonable nor customary, right?
Sure.
So there's limits to this, but it's within reason as defined by the terms. And we don't have issues relative to that. We've been working with the program for a long time, and that's never been an issue or a point of contention.
Drew, you mentioned you're on Road Dog Radio once a month. For our viewers, and we'll even put this on there, when are you on there? What time, so people can subscribe to that? Because, man, you're 30 years in the industry. You have a wealth of knowledge. And I think the more, I say this all the time, the more we can educate our members and our audience, we're all going to benefit from it.
I agree. And what it is, it's on the Mark Willis Show, Road Dog Radio, which is channel 146, I believe, of Sirius Radio. What time and what date, it really fluctuates.
Oh, okay.
We make ourselves readily available.
I think a lot of our guys listen to the Road Dog anyways. They may have already heard.
They're going to hear us, right? So I'm on there with, Tommy Rook, I mentioned, from the MCIEF, and that's really our entree there. We want to talk about insurance for the truckers. We want to talk about from the insurance side, so the truckers understand what we're trying to accomplish. And you mentioned, Larry, I mean, how much feedback do you get when you're presenting a new business or a renewal and it's all about the rate, right?
Yep.
Well, I want folks to be able to look at me and know that I'm one of the guys who causes that, meaning I'm developing the premium. I didn't cause the rates to go up necessarily, but I'm the ones that's developing the premium, and they have the opportunity to call in and talk about that. But we talk about everything associated with motor carriers and what's going on with them.
You guys have talked a lot about insurance, and I'm not an insurance guy. I'm coming from a different perspective, but I do represent a lot of our members. And, small town kid, grew up on a farm. I've seen these small owner operators, just scraping by to make ends meet. So you get that renewal every year. It's continuing to go up, trying to manage that. But I guess if you could, I'm going to frame it this way. Where could the insurance industry have done a better job with trucking? We know there's a bunch of stuff out there, but man, these premiums are going up. These, nuclear verdicts. These guys are just getting squeezed to death, the small guys. And those are the people we represent on our platform. Mm-hmm. But where has insurance our industry almost failed the trucking industry, for lack of better terms?
I hate to use the term or hear the term.
I don't want to say failed, but could have done a better job.
But I think that's accurate. That's the other side of it. I think that there have been some challenges. And I think it starts with the underwriting piece, candidly. We have found that some underwriters define certain risks differently than perhaps they should be. Right. So when we talk about that pool, we're trying to put all this money in there. Then we're also trying to recognize that what money should be allocated for this risk for potential losses, that risk for potential losses. The problem is when you have those insurers and motor carriers that have a level of frequency, they really haven't been paying their way. Right. So some of these motor carriers have been getting more out of the insurance industry than they were putting in. And that's part of the problem. But let's be real. It's not just about that. We've had unprecedented events. Nuclear verdicts. I hate to talk about that, but it's real. As an old claims guy, I'm going to talk about social inflation. That's the reality. What used to be a $100,000 claim is now a $300,000 claim. That's more important to me because those are everyday claims. Those are happening all the time. It's not about that great big verdict they had in Florida for $1 billion. It's about the $100,000 to $300,000. It's about the $500 to $1,500. All those things add up, and those daily claims, that's our working capital in the insurance world.
Well, we know this, that, the trucking insurance industry has suffered. They're not coming out on top. As these premiums are going up, they're getting paid out just as fast. So, I assume even the frequency of, you said claims are going up. Are there more claims today per company than there was 10, 15 years, 20, 30 years ago?
It depends. We also have to think about the demographics and the operations. Our world in the transportation, what you're referring to is really commercial auto.
Yeah.
Commercial auto has been in the cellar. For every dollar we bring in, we've been paying $1.05.
Right.
And with interest rates as low as they were for a while, we were upside down for a long time, right? But let's talk about the industry. Commercial auto has been redefined. We have these little gray trucks that run through our neighborhoods, right? delivering everything that we could want. We have last mile disassociated from that. We have a different type of transportation exposure than we had before. So back to your comment or question about frequency's up, but it's different, right? So when you have a metro area with a lot of these gray trucks running around, they're going to bump something once in a while, right? The good news is that bump isn't usually significant, right? You're not talking about an 80,000 pound vehicle that's striking something with heavy speed and force. You're talking about a package van that bumps into a parked car or a mailbox or something. So it's a little bit different. But I think what we found is, the frequency has gone up post-COVID. But more importantly, the dollar amounts, and I don't want to say severity necessarily, because the accident and the losses aren't more severe, but the dollars associated with them are. Everybody has a different view of what those dollars look like. I've been a part of a number of cases that have gone to litigation, and you have the jury there, and you never want to leave things in the jury box decision. Then after that, you do a post-mortem. You're talking to the jurors if they'll allow you to, and figure out where their mind was. And sometimes the arbitrary thought process that these jurors have, it's crazy. They just tend to put themselves in the spot of that injured party, and they just make up things. And it's unfortunate, but it's human nature. That's just the way they function. So what we're striving for is talking about cameras, talking about better quality drivers, talking about lowering frequency, talking about all those things. Let's try to avoid that in the first place, because that's risk management 101 is avoidance. And if we can avoid that, we put ourselves in a better spot. And that will get back to hopefully reducing some of that frequency that we have. But I do want to recognize it's different now than what it was. It's a different kind of frequency. Again, we're talking about low impact, low speed by comparison to what it was before, when you had a lot more over the road exposure.
Okay. So I always say, sorry, Larry, I always think about it in this sense. And I mean, this is my thought process. So this isn't factual, but back in the day, I mean, you had, a lot of your trucking companies or owner operators were farmers. They operated equipment. I mean, these guys, they've been operating equipment since they were, 5 years old.
Sure.
So by the time they're in a truck going over the road, they just know those rigs. And it just like today, that demographic is fading, just with.
It is. And you're touching on a totally different problem that we have. The good news about those guys back then, they had the distraction of grinding gears, right? They were running through the transmission. They didn't have cell phones. More importantly, they didn't have four-wheelers on cell phones. You didn't have the population density, even in rural areas, that we have now. And back then, it might have been a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, so there could be differences there. It's totally different, but you're right. I think what you're hitting on, or one of the things I think we ought to talk about, is how do we find those lesser experienced drivers and get them in the cab and make sure they recognize this is a career, right?
Yes. Yep.
That's what we need to think about. And unfortunately, right now, you guys and a lot of your insureds in a good spot, because if they're exempt, they can get younger drivers holding a CDL, hauling some grain, right? That's a great training ground. Unfortunately, folks on my side, a lot of insurance companies still don't like that. They think of this as an 18-year-old driver. This is where I think we can do a lot of good.
Yeah.
If we use technology for what it's intended, and that can include, driver assistance as well as accountability measures.
Agreed.
We need to be thoughtful as insurance providers to help qualify these drivers. We can't have them sit on the bench somewhere until they're 21 and then, oh, by the way, they need 2 years of experience. So now we're talking 23. Where are they going to come from? They've already got a career somewhere else, right? So we have to find ways to do that. And I think we're on the cutting edge of that with technology, where we should be having those conversations. Trust me, I am. With every carrier we work with, how can we get quality, lesser experienced drivers? And I don't want to use age as the requirement, because we do have some drivers that are coming in of age, but they just don't have that experience. We need to get them qualified too. But we also have to recognize that I'm an old fart, and technology is not my favorite thing. Younger folks, technology is their thing.
Yeah.
They embrace this stuff. They can view, and I don't want to belittle this at all, but they can view driving a tractor as a video game to some sort, and they're successful with it. They can manage this a lot better than some folks like myself. They're embracing the technology. Why wouldn't we take advantage of that? If there's not a day that goes by that I don't have this conversation with somebody, would you rather have an inexperienced driver who's got great past performance on his MVR, has all the tools associated with safety relative to the rig, has good oversight by the motor carrier and his supervisor? Or would you rather have a 50-year-old driver who has all the seasoning in the world, but can't get from here to there without getting a citation? All the experience you want,
yeah,
but I think I'd probably lean on technology and that lesser experienced driver. And that's what we're trying to get the insurance industry talked into. And I think the support's there.
Yeah. Super good.
I want to take it back here just real quick. Can you explain what social inflation is?
Social inflation is a generic term that is basically blanketing everything out there that can increase costs. So as you talk about medical, right? The cost of medical is not cheaper today than it was before. You talk about the marketing and the propaganda that occurs with attorneys. They talk about, I got this big verdict, that bad big verdict over here. Folks start to see the value of a dollar being different, right?
Sure.
So the value of my dollar is a lot smaller than it was before, but the value that a jury may see a dollar is a lot bigger than it is.
Sure.
So that injury gets exacerbated and exaggerated. So that's really what we're talking about, is a bunch of other things that circulate around an event cause that event to be viewed differently and greater with a much more significant dollar amount.
Sure. No, that's really good. I just wanted to make sure our audience understood what that was. We've talked about a lot of different topics. If you were an owner operator, if you were a small motor carrier, what advice would you give to that person, or what would you in their shoes be seeking out from your agent or from other resources or from the internet? What kind of resources would you be putting in your mind and then incorporating into your business if that was you?
It's a loaded question, but I think the best way to approach this is you've got to find a key partner. And I know we've spoken about before that in my prior experience, I've had a number of motor carriers, even though I wasn't a producer, I was an underwriter, that would call me up before they made business decisions. And I think that's the thing that these motor carriers have to recognize, is that, an insurance agent is more than just providing insurance. They're providing some of that business acumen that they have as a business owner. They own their own renewals, they own their business. And more importantly, they can help recognize how that can impact their insurance costs, right? And insurance is a huge expense for these motor carriers. They can also help them insulate themselves from loss exposures. And we talked about avoidance. If you're doing this one thing, I'll pick on a motor carrier that we saw. They were a grain hauler, but they had a little bit of livestock exposure. And the key was, we want this. We want to continue doing this. Well, how much revenue are you generating from that livestock exposure versus, guess what? Here's how much more premium I'm going to charge you because of that livestock exposure. So helping them be educated about that is key. And I think that starts with looking at somebody's email handle. Is it TRS? Look at their business card. Is there a TRS designation on there? Because that's going to help you pre-qualify that individual. But then again, as the motor carrier, delve deep into that relationship. Be more than just providing me insurance. I know my insurance provider, and I'm not a motor carrier.
Yeah.
So I would hope that they know that individual so they can give them guidance. The other side of this is, how many motor carriers do you see a day? Be it on the phone, email, in person? A lot. Unfortunately, how many motor carriers does this motor carrier operate a day? It's one. So in many cases, that retail agent has a lot more experience in certain aspects and facets of the operation than the motor carrier actually does. So lean on them.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, dude, I love that. I think, I guess what just keeps stirring in my mind is this educating our group, because I think some carriers can listen to this and be like, and I've even heard it's like, well, my rates are going up. Who cares? I mean,
I like,
everybody's, if somebody else is going to, we're having all this other stuff going on, like what I'm doing isn't going to help me because my rates are going to go up regardless. But you're saying the opposite. I mean, your rates, the rates are going to go up because of the group, but you still got to protect yourself.
You're on that spectrum, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to be on the spectrum of those motor carriers that are like you, do the similar operation, have same number of units, they look similar to you? You guys are going to pay within this range. Wouldn't you rather pay on that lower range or the higher range?
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, it's some very basic things can impact that premium. I can't tell you how many times we've all heard this, that, it's my nephew, I got to keep him on the policy. But do you realize how much that nephew is costing you? Okay, here's your net profit from that nephew, and here's your insurance premium. Those are real dollars. Are you willing to make that trade? In some cases, it doesn't make sense. In some cases, it does. But it's just those simple decisions sometimes just don't seem so simple, and they should be. And I know it's easy for me to say that on this side, but being that pragmatic, partner, like I said, if you have a good retail agent that you're working with, an insurance agent, and they can be your conscience, That's huge. Why are you doing this? It's not, I'm not accusing you of anything, but explain to me why this makes sense from your seat. And so often that's impactful. And having that conversation, making those decisions are going to get closer to this end of the spectrum. And I can tell you that's an advantage when you're paying less for your insurance than this competitor of yours over there. You're probably going to get better loads. You're probably going to look better, through the FMCSA lens, which that's probably something we ought to talk about. You talk about everybody is looking at the FMCSA information on a motor carrier. You have shippers that are looking at that. They're trying to qualify folks that they want to give contracts to or loads to based on how they look in the eyes of the government. Because guess what? With vicarious liability, brokerage exposures, et cetera, these folks can get looped in. And they want to make sure if they're going to be looped in, they're looped in with a good motor carrier. So we can't hide anymore like we did before. All this is out in the open. And I think those motor carriers that embrace it, that are holding themselves accountable, that are listening to good counsel from their retail relationships, those are the folks that are going to continue to be at that lower end of that premium spectrum. Will their rates go up? Yep, just not as high.
When I worked as a shipper, many moons ago, over 13 years ago, to be honest, Drew, we didn't look at the safety scores. If they had insurance, we hired them. But I wonder if that's even a selling point a carrier can do when they present to a shipper. Maybe that shipper, because in the grain industry, again, as long as they sent their cert in, right, and it checked out, right, we filed it away. But maybe if that carrier came in and said, hey, I have, a better safety score than the average or whatever, I think that could be pretty beneficial.
It is. And if you're not bragging on yourself, nobody else is.
Yeah.
If you're not pointing out the positive, that also is going to plant the seed with that shipper to say, wait a minute, maybe I should look at this a little bit more in depth. Does this person have an adequate score? And it really is a differentiator. And you're right. Sometimes we have to point that out. I can tell you I've seen it numerous times and had that come back from shippers that was part of the qualification. We're also seeing some other things out there. We've got motor carriers that are being qualified or disqualified based on the limits that they can certificate. So, okay, the load may be a 750 required load or less, right? And they may have $1 million filing posted for them, but that shipper may say, you know what? I want to know that there was another underwriting that happened, and I want to see a $2 million limit. So we're seeing things kind of evolve a little bit, that everybody is trying to find a short circuit to qualifying. I'm not making this decision on my own. I've got all the available information, not just the best, all the available information to make that decision. So it's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a huge conversation. I think this is a great conversation. This is the quality of conversation we want to bring to our listeners and educate them. As we kind of wrap this up, Drew, if you would just give one piece of advice, like, hey, this is the one thing, nice and simple. The one thing, we've got a lot of different stuff, that maybe initiatives that we want to roll out in 2024. What is like the one initiative as a motor carrier that you would be looking?
And Drew, I'll ask this, I'll reframe this a little bit away. One thing about our BulkLoads podcast, we've developed an ecosystem of a lot of people that watches this show that aren't even in trucking, but they're very intrigued about it, and people that are wanting to get into it. So speak through that lens as well.
Okay. I will say very generically, recognizing the lens, pick your partner. It's much like picking your wife or your spouse or your husband or your girlfriend or whatever. Pick your partner. And I think nothing can be more impactful to your success, your happiness, you name it. It's all driven by picking the right partner. I have seen horrific experiences with great motor carriers with a bad retail agent. I've seen great retail agents that have bad experience with motor carriers or insurance carriers or what have you. So you have to be specific in picking your partner and be thoughtful about it. And what I mean by that, and I'll bring it back to insurance a little bit, it's not always the cheapest price.
Yep.
It's not always the best looking. It's not, whatever the case may be, there's more to it than that. And not to be punny when I say this, but we're truly in it for the long haul. There's nothing I like more than having a 30-year relationship with a motor carrier. There's nothing more than I like to have a retail agent that calls up and says, I remember we wrote our first account 25 years ago, or whatever the case may be. That shows the longevity of that relationship. And it's work. It's give and take. It's all that. It's accountability. You name it. It is truly picking your partner and going into it, good, bad, or indifferent. If I've got a problem with somebody, you're damn skippy, you're going to hear from it. from me about it. And I hope they do the same with me. And that's what the partnership is. And I can't leave without saying this. If you're a motor carrier looking for a partner, look for the TRS designation. That's a big start. It's somewhat pre-qualified, if that makes sense.
It's good for those of you that don't know. About half of our agency is TRS qualified. The other half are currently going through the designation. So we're big proponents of it. We love it. It has helped us excel our business greatly because we know that we're providing quality resources to our motor carriers, and that's what we're all about.
And real quick, TRS stands for
Transportation Risk Specialist.
Yep.
So look for that designation. If you do business with us, you'll see it in our emails. Again, Drew, I can't thank you enough for coming here. You've been a great partner for us, and we're looking forward to our future together. You've been great for our insureds, and that's always our focus, is making sure they have the best coverage at the most affordable price that the marketplace has to offer, and we're accomplishing that. So thank you again.
Yep. Thanks for the partnership.
Oh, thank you, Drew.
Fred, what I loved about this episode is that Drew was he was talking a lot about why people's premiums are going up, and he was using the term social inflation, and just describing that sometimes inflation causes your premium to go up, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. But a lot of times, he was saying, is people don't realize that they can lower their premiums by doing stuff for their trucking company, like looking at the different loss runs and the citations, kind of trying to keep those down. So I thought that was very interesting. He also said that a lot of the reasons why people their premium was going up is simply because the value over the past couple of years, the value of their equipment was going up, which is in turn makes their insurance premiums go up. From my standpoint, that would annoy me. I mean, it's good. It's good that the value of the equipment is going up, but I mean, I don't know. It just making everything else and your payments go up, that would kind of annoy me. But
that is the value of having an agent that works with trucks specifically, because we can sit down with you and figure out the values.
Do you guys go? I'm not super familiar with your guys' process. Do you guys do a lot of that, sit down with the client and actually run through all of their like CAP reports and say, hey, this is what we can do to help you clean up your record to get you a better premium? Are you guys doing a lot of that?
We do a lot of that. And then a lot of times, these truckers that have gotten in the market during the COVID era, their equipment's very highly valued.
Yeah.
If we can adjust values to where they reflect more of what today's market looks like, which I've done a lot of that here recently, we can actually reduce premiums in a healthy way. We don't want to water down coverages, but in this case, we can actually insure your company for what is true versus just inflated values.
Well, that helps. I know premiums are high nowadays. So with that being said, we'll kind of wrap up the episode piece of it here. Drew mentioned again, you got to be with an agent who has that TRS designation. Fred, as I mentioned, you do have that certification. And basically that means that you're just specialized to do trucking. And you're kind of an expert in that trucking insurance side of things. So if somebody's watching this podcast, how do they get in contact with you? And even if they just have questions for you or just want to send their policy and say, hey, can you save me any money here?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways. I know some guys are different, but you can either email me. My email is fred@bulkinsurancegroup.com, or you could hit my cell phone. My cell phone number is 417-232-6055.
Nice. Very nice. So with that, we have calendars, guys. We actually ran out of calendars. There's so much traction with those. We underestimated the popularity, but we are going to place another order of calendars. So here in a couple of weeks, we're getting a new shipment in. So if you have not got a 2024 BulkLoads calendars, let us know. I think Joe's going to put the link in the description again. You can click there and you can sign up for a calendar. We'll send it completely for free there. Also, we'll be at the Iowa Ag Expo January 30th through February 1st in Des Moines. They have a big Ag Expo. We're sending a couple guys. We don't actually have a booth this year, unfortunately, but we'll send a couple guys up there. So we'd love to meet up with you. If you guys are going, attending, gonna be there, let us know so we can meet up with you. We have some swag, some exclusive items that we'll take up there to give away. So excited for that. And then also, of course, Bulk Freight Conference 2024 is coming up April 24th through the 26th. Go to bulkfreightconference.com to get your tickets. I think the early bird is on sale until the end of this month. So after the end of this month, they are going to go up in price, unfortunately. But Fred, you were at the conference. You helped work it last year. What did you think overall?
Honestly, man, it was awesome to see all of our customers, especially the ones that I'd worked with since I'd first started at BulkLoads, just come together. And the amount of times that I heard customers say, I've done business with you for 20 years and I've never met you. It was insane. So seeing everybody build on their relationship was huge. As far as on my end of things goes, I learned a lot myself that
me too.
I knew, but I didn't, so that's refreshing.
Yeah, and this year we're kicking it up a notch. It's going to be like 5 times bigger. We'll have more educational pieces to it. But yeah, definitely go out and get your tickets. Other than that, I will let you know, guys, we take prayer very seriously here at BulkLoads. So if you guys have any prayer requests, if you're going through something, if your company is going through something, or if you have a family member who's in need of some prayers, please email us prayer@bulkloads.com. We have some team members who pray over those constantly and consistently. So let us know, and we'd be happy to do that for you. Also, if you could just like and subscribe, share this podcast. It really helps us out. It helps us get this content in front of people who need to see it and who want to see it. So if you could just subscribe, like, and share this podcast with anybody you know. So, all right. God bless.